indentation is very fundamental to Python. Just like we indent paragraphs and when we make bulleted lists, we indent stuff. Indentation is vital to Python just as it is vital to understanding that, right? So, and actually, if you don't indent things properly, Python will not be able to run. So, for example, let's say x equal to 5 if, and we'll go over what I'm writing here later, but I just want to show you guys indentation first. So if I put my print statement back here, print x, right? Look, there's a red line that appears, right? This red line means that the program won't run and it'll raise an error when we run it in the console. See? It indentation error. Expect an indented block. So all we have to do is click tab here and look. And this line will appear and a set of lines will appear actually the more you indent, right? And thus now this is going to work, right? See? It prints 5. And alright, so now we're going to talk about the real bulk of our conversation today, and it is going to be about data types. So in Python, there are many, many data types actually, not, but these are the data types we're going to go over in our course, and the data types we're probably going to use the most in our course. There are other data types, the binary data types, and then there's also the set, frozen set data types, and there's also doubles and numeric types, but we won't go over that. We're not going to be using that in our course. Alright? So let's just start with strings, right? So a string is just anything wrapped. It's just any sort of text, but we wrap it in either single apostrophes or double apostrophes, or what we call quotes, right? So for example, a string could be like my name, Muhammad Ashik. This is a string, right? And when we print out the string, it'll just print the text in the console without the quotes, Muhammad Ashik, right? And we can also wrap it in single quotes. So Muhammad Ashik. Alright, so you see, same thing, right? And those are strings, right? And I'll go more deeply into depth with strings much later, and I hope you guys stay tuned for that lesson as well. And then we'll go on to the numeric types. So if you think off the top of your head, what are numbers that you can write? You can write numbers in integers, decimals, mixed numbers, so on and so forth, right? But we don't have mixed numbers in Python. We just have decimals, right? And you write the decimals with the floating point, but you write the integers with just anything. You can put a negative sign on it, right? So these, any whole number, I guess, from actually in all the ranges that Python can handle, that's a whole number. It's an integer. All right, but as soon as we add this decimal point, it has become a floating point, right? And if you can see, you can print out this floating point as well, and it will appear as a floating point. And we call this decimal floating point. And I won't talk about why it's called that now. It'll take quite a bit of time, but just think of this as a decimal number, and that's what the float type is. So now we have sequence types. So sequence types are actually, I'm going to cover them more extensively in our data structures lesson, but like our beginner data structures lesson, right? But let's just, I'll show you the basic data types right now. So we can go list one is equal. This is an empty list here. We use brackets. That's our denotation, right? Oh, sorry. And then you can also have tuple one. We use parentheses for our tuples, right? And sorry, you don't need that semicolon. It's just a force of habit, right? And then there's also range types, right? And we save range with the keyword range, and then we can pick it. And naturally, we'll start from 0. And if you can see, it'll start as a start integer, a stop integer, and a step integer, right? And step just means how much it increments. So we can just write 0, 1, 1, right? Or 0 to 5, 1. But this 0 here and this 1 are default, right? So it'll naturally start at 0 and it'll naturally increment by 1. So we don't need these actually. And our range type can just be range 5. Alright? And thus we have our sequence types. Alright, and then we're also going to talk about our mapping type a little. So, and we're going to go deeper into dictionaries a little later. So, but dictionaries are very, very important in Python. We also wrap them in these curly brackets, and they function off something we call a key value system. So, keys can be mostly anything. Generally, they're strings, right? And a lot of the times they'll be required to be strings. And this is how you write. So the key value goes key and then value, right? So there's the key and then there's the value, and you can call the value once you call it from the key, right? So you can write dict1. So let's just do print. Actually, no. I'll go over this more extensively in our data structures episode as well, because this is pretty. This is. I want you guys to get the fundamentals first before getting into this. All right. But then there's also our Boolean and none types. I'm going to group these guys together because they're pretty important. In Java, we call none types null, but we don't really use null in Python. We just have the keyword none. Right? But Booleans are either true or false. Right, and these are very, very important. You're going to see why, especially when we talk about our conditionals. I gave you guys a little taste of that at the very beginning, but true and false are very important. And then there's also none, right? So now we have all these types. Let me just type out all our types. So we started out with strings, right? This is a string. This is an integer. This is a floating point. This is a list. This is a tuple. This is a range. This is and these are booleans, and this is none. All right, so these are all our types, yes. And in Python we have something called a built-in type function, so we can actually tell what type something is, right? So if we type type m and we print out, the type of m, what do you think it'll return in the console? It will return, print. It will return class str, so it is a string, right? And we can use the type function to verify what type something, a certain object or any variable is, right? And so now I'm going to talk about mathematical operators. So we're going to start talking about this in terms of integers and floats. The mathematical operators in Python are plus, addition, minus, all right, multiplication, and exponentation. So this double asterisk is exponentation. It is equivalent to this, but we can't use this. This is used for something else in Python, right? So we can't use this. I'm not even sure what this is called, this exponent mark. We can't use that. So we use this double asterisk, right? Then we have division, and then we have a couple of special things. We have modulus, which I don't know if you guys have seen before, but I'm sure if you've talked about remainders in math, you know that when you modulus something, it produces a remainder of something. For example, if I divided if I went 6 mod 3, it would return 0 because um, there's no remainder. So and it'll give you back the remainder. Then there's also floor division, which basically just means if I divide, like for example, 6 divided by 4, so print 6 divided by 4, it will return a floating point, right? Oh, I have to comment this stuff out first. It'll return a floating point, 1.5, right? But if I use floor division, what this double slash is called, it will return 1 because it omits, it basically, every time you use floor division, it floors the floating point. So it removes everything after the decimal point and it just returns an integer. So it'll round it down, essentially, right? And that's floor division. So these are the main mathematical operators we use in the Python programming language. I suggest you guys get familiar with this. This is very important, right? We're only going to talk about these mathematical operators in terms of numbers. Actually, a lot of these different types can be manipulated with these mathematical operators, but we'll save those for different times. Alright, and now we're going to talk about something very, very important in Python. You guys have seen me do this a couple times. It's declaring a variable. And we declare a variable with the equal sign, right? And so on the left side, there will be our variable. We can just say this variable is x, and on our right side will be our data type, or what we call our object, right? So I'll just type 5. So now x is equal to 5, and this is a global variable because it's not within any indentation of any like conditional statement or loop, and we'll talk more about scope or the dealing between global and local variables later. But right now, let's just worry about this x being equal to 5. So now we've declared a variable. So now when we print x, what will happen? It'll be equal to 5. And we can declare multiple variables at the same thing by just going x equals y equals 5. So if we print x comma y, this is how we print multiple objects, it'll print what? 5 and 5, right? So it's printed x as 5 and it's printed y as 5. Alright, now let's say we want to make y something else. We can say y is equal to a string. So Muhammad, right? And it will print 5 Muhammad, as you can see, right? And thus is how you declare variables. And let me talk to you guys about how you do, like what variable names are allowed. So generally our syntax for declaring variables functions off of this, right? You either, and my personal favorite, you either um, separate things with underscore, and we usually do this in Python. Some people use a hyphen, in HTML and CSS, they use hyphens, and but in Python we use underscores, and I can say is equal to Muhammad Ashik, right? And this is our variable, right? But you can also keep this first word lowercase and make the second word uppercase, and this is also a variable convention that we use. But this is fine, actually, but we just in terms of convention, it's not really good because it gets confusing after a while in the terms of the readability of our program. But actually, some variable names that are not allowed are, I mean, not this, but like you can't make variable names integers, right? Like I can't say, if you see it says cannot assign to literal. Literal is just a data type that's not, right? Like I can't assign a string to a string, right? We use that using the dictionary key value system that I talked before, but we cannot do that, right? We have to say variable, and we can type anything for our variables, just as long, I mean, it can even contain numbers, as long as numbers are not at the very start of the variable, it's fine, right? And just make sure, and we can make any of these data types into a variable. For example, I can say, um, and you've seen me do this before, I can say true bool is equal to true, right? And now we can print the type of the true bool, and I want you guys to guess what this, sorry, yep, variables are case sensitive, so we must make them the exact same as they appear in the program. And I want you guys to guess what this will return. It will return print out Boolean, right? And that is it for our lesson today. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time.